So this is our hosting team, our intrepid, talented, creative, exploratory hosting team, some of whom are here today. The others are probably sleeping and or working away on something else because they're in different time zones. So Stéphane and Chloe are here from La 27e Région in France. Lily's here from the city of Vancouver, and Payvand and I are here from University of British Columbia. And then here are some of the others who couldn't join us today. And we really want to invite you into this space of exploration, of learning with and from one another, of non-closure, probably some contestation, some healthy, respectful contestation. This is really a place where we've all been entangled in practice together in different ways over the last year or many years for some of us. And we've got big questions for ourselves and for the field of public sector innovation and how we might be more ambitious, more transformative, have more significant impacts in our work. And we talk about that with each other a lot in different ways as we run into each other in our practices. And we really wanted to open up this space to engage with these conversations with more of you, because in our work, we know we've met many of you, and often we feel like we're the one person or one person in a small team who are asking ourselves these questions in these big, sometimes quite stuck public institutions. And so we really wanted to make space for us to learn from one another, to meet each other, and to ask some big questions of ourselves and of the field. So that's what today is. We are by no means experts. We are learners alongside everybody else who spend a lot of time thinking about the questions that we're exploring together today. So I wanted to just share a couple of things that we're writing in our blog space for this project. And Payvand we'll share the link to the blog space later on today. So if you want to explore there, and invite others to join us in writing in that space too, if you wish. But a couple of things that are there now that I'm holding in as big questions as we begin this community of practice together. So the first one is just Francisca and I have written a piece that builds on knowledge and writing and thinking of many that have come before us. Francisca, one of our co-hosts who's not here today, from the Bloomberg Center for Public Innovation. And we tried to capture the current thinking about these different approaches to public sector innovation. Many of our hosting team have come to this space from the Public Sector Innovation Labs as a specific form of innovation that's been really interesting and dynamic over the last decade. But we're finding that name is sort of disintegrating a bit in a way. It's still a helpful container, but it's also diffusing, maybe is a better word, diffusing in some interesting ways. And we tried to capture these different approaches to public sector innovation that we're seeing in practice in the field at this time. And so many people started out in the lab space as labs as creative platforms, problem-solving spaces, or partners, and systemic co-design. We started kind of more in those spaces, but Lily and I, in our practice in Vancouver before I left, we moved more and I know Penny in her work in Auckland moved more into like scaling deep and transformative learning, and which means that like the container of the lab gets a lot fuzzier because you're actually working on culture change and organizational change and thinking about innovation work in some different ways. And then there's also these moves for mission-oriented convening, the grand challenge. And then some of us are more in these network and learning partner, enabling partner sorts of spaces. So for us, and we're going to talk today about theories of change of public sector innovation, hopefully these different typologies or different approaches start to help us become a bit more rigorous and clear about what it is that we're actually doing, because it's pretty hard to do all of these things. And it can be difficult to learn from one another if we don't have a deeper understanding of the approaches that are the leading approaches that we're using in our work. And I find that this thinking about our work in this kind of way also helps us to see other pathways when the one that we're on becomes blocked or difficult or not so effective for us anymore. There's different possibilities, different doors to open, different yeses to follow. So that's the first kind of offering I'll make into our space today. And then the second is this one that, again, Lily and I, with Maggie Lowe, who's one of our co-hosts at UBC also, and two other colleagues, gathered up this. We were trying to we did a project together that was called Transforming Cities from Within, with Canadian cities working toward climate equity and decolonization challenges together. And we were trying to describe we were trying to get at this a deeper description of when we talked about transformation and we talked about paradigm changes and systems change work. What were we actually trying to move away from and move toward in the public sector when working on really complex, entangled social and ecological justice and well-being challenges? So this is our best description at this moment in time of that moving away and moving toward. And this is one graphic, but there's 3 pieces to it. So I'll just kind of slowly move through these pieces. For us, we really used that. We found this really helpful, I'd say, and maybe Lily will pick up on this later when she starts sharing about pushing the boundaries of public sector innovation at this time. But for us, this really helped us orient our own paradigm, our own mindset as we were holding space for transformation for others that we were in community with in that learning journey. So I'll invite us in to be kind of playing with and contending with these moves, these dances today. And if you're curious to learn more about either of those, there's some things written up in the blog space about that. So I'll leave those there, and I'm going to move us into our plan for today. So we've got 3 prompts. We're going to our co-hosts will initiate responses to the prompts. And then feel free to engage with them yourselves in the chat and also in the slides as you wish. Hopefully we'll have some time to hear some of your voices out loud in our shared space as well. And Lily, are you ready? You're going to start, and I'm going to ask you the question to kick us off. Okay. Good. Okay. So our first prompt is, what does it mean to push the boundaries of public sector innovation at this time? What does it mean to push the boundaries of public sector at this time, public sector innovation at this time? Thanks, Lily.
Thanks, Lindsay. And hi, everybody. It's really nice to be here with all of you. Some of you who I know and others who I'm excited to meet and be on this journey with. So for me, pushing the boundaries of public sector innovation at this time looks like really choosing that kind of transformative innovation approach. So really choosing transformation and I think, being very clear in kind of a move away from simply making like incremental changes to government or to whatever kind of space within the public sector you're working in, and actually holding this North Star of we're trying to transform it for the well-being of current and future generations of all humans and other earthly relatives. So for me, it's like having a very big North Star around that, around being transformative. And with that, it looks like, sometimes being in the composting space, like Lindsay was mentioning, of really kind of embracing that there's a lot of ambiguity and a lack of clarity around what comes, how we get to what comes next. And being okay with being in that space and just being with what is, which can often be kind of wading through with folks on what those stuck patterns are, those what we're moving away from sort of patterns, and really working to compost them or hospice them, and really take care of people while we're doing that. I think as I've been working with the City of Vancouver and with Solutions Lab, and we've done a series of labs and communities of practice, and now the work that I'm currently doing related to climate justice is it's kind of like this in-between space where there isn't necessarily a container, like a formal container yet, or there are a few different containers in which we're doing the work. And so it involves kind of a lot of like yeah, I think just staying focused on tending to individuals as they're navigating this kind of ambiguous space and figuring out how to embed this work into into what they're currently doing, and without having necessarily the formal container of this is a lab to do this in. Yeah, so I think really centering kind of care for folks that you're working with and that I'm working with, and also just surrendering to things unfolding, so surrendering to emergence. Um, and the thing that's been helpful for me in that is choosing different worldviews to lead from. So through learning from Indigenous ways of being here in BC and also elsewhere, and also drawing on the lineage of Black feminism and those that are centering their work in kind of care and liberation has been really helpful for providing North Stars, I think, for what we're really trying to go for, and knowing that those worldviews already have a wealth of knowledge and experience in enacting kind of the world that we're trying to nourish more of, and not just kind of continue with the dominant system that continues to be the most active and alive. Yeah, maybe I'll stop there as I I'll leave others to come in and share what their thoughts are.
Stefan, are you still there? There you are. You're on mute. Did you want to reply to that one? What does it mean to you to push the boundaries of public sector innovation at this time? Either pick up on anything that Lily shared or your own views about that.
I think so. At la 27e Région, we are exploring all this stuff of public sector transformation since 16 years now. And the way I see pushing the boundaries of public innovation in my vision is to unlock the public innovation taboos, who are the lack of impact, the side effects that we never really describes, the trend to solutionism, the fact that sometimes we never talk about politics or democracy. So there is a culture of innovation, at least in France here, which is very influenced by tech industries, consultancy business, of course, a little bit also by social innovation, but mostly on the business side. So we miss a specific culture for public innovation sector. So yeah, the way I see pushing the boundaries is not putting the problems under the, in French we say put sous le tapis, to hide the problems, but to face it, and to show all these taboos. I don't know if you agree with this with notion of taboos, but there are many taboos in public policies and including in public sector innovation. So how do we go beyond this taboo? The taboo of the fact that we are building many solutions for people who don't really need it. So how do we put more efforts on people and problems that are really important? So yeah, this is my way to name the idea to push the boundary.
What both of you just said sounds really risky in for different reasons and different ways. So I'm wondering how you or how we think about that, right? How do we there's courage required in taking different sorts of risks in a field where a lot of people already feel kind of, that I know anyway, feel sort of precarious in the ways that they work already. So how do you think about that?
I think there is room for doing more transformating things without taking too much risk. I personally think that when you work with government, when you work with politicians, sometimes you forget to put rules on the table, to negotiate. And so there is a room for more negotiation, for more no, we won't do it, for more or yes, but yes, we can do it, but there are certain conditions. So I always thought that we talk a lot in the public sector innovation. We talk a lot about methodologies. We talk a lot about tools, practices, but we never talk about new rules, new conditions, prerequisites. At la 27e région, we spend a lot of time on contracts. How do you never start a project without a clear contracts between people, putting the prerequisites and building something that is shared by everybody, and everybody accept the rules, the new rules. So I think there are some room for not saying spontaneous yes every time we build a new project with government, but introduce some condition and rules. And every time we did it with government, most of the time they accept these new rules. They see the value of bringing new rules on the table. So and so there is room before it becomes too risky, I think.
Yeah, I think what I would add is that there's many different ways to think about interventions, and it doesn't always have to be like a really big, risky feeling thing. Like there's like what I often ask myself is, what is the intervention I can make in this moment on the system, on the current dominant system? And sometimes that's a different way of gathering or running meetings. Sometimes it's just a very small tweak in language for writing an email or connecting with folks. Sometimes it's just spending more time reflecting within myself on how is what I'm doing, or how am I currently showing up in this work, and how is the system impacting me, and then what is then being projected outwardly. So I think that there's a lot of different ways in which people can be transformative without it looking or seeming like without it being this really big kind of rupturing risk. And yeah, and then also I think there is an element of, as we lean more towards those risks, I think that is part of the embracing the kind of like ambiguity and that unshakiness, which is not easy, I know, and I think it requires a lot of grace and patience and compassion with yourself and with others that you're working with, to kind of continue towards that edge, and then maybe sometimes it's taking a couple steps back if it feels like you're too close to the edge or you're about to fall off. And so I think it's really like that sort of dancing with what the boundary looks like, and being open to renegotiating what those boundaries are in the work that you're doing, just over and over and over again. So knowing that they're not fixed, and that they can be redrawn or redefined in different ways.
Thank you both. Okay, I'm going to move us to our second prompt. Stefan, hopefully you're ready. Okay, and maybe I'll read it, and then maybe so I'll read it. Maybe you can begin by actually like, what is the theory of change or transformation before you respond. So our second prompt is, how might we imagine or reimagine and strengthen the theories of transformation we are using to support higher impact, ecologically responsible, and socially just public sector innovation work? I'll read it one more time just so others who haven't heard this before can settle into the question. How might we reimagine and strengthen the theories of transformation we are using to support higher impact, ecologically responsible, and socially just public sector innovation work?
Do you want me to elaborate a little bit? My vision of theory of change and the way to go further is the following. When we started again 16 years ago, we didn't call it theory of change, but we just put two columns on the table, on the board. One was the list of things that we did not want to do anymore for ethical reason or because there was no impact. For instance, do we really care about publishing reports that nobody reads? And in the other columns, what we dreamed to do, what was our dream in terms of practice, in terms of, for instance, we are dreaming of more ethnographic research because we felt that traditional research or consultancy doesn't allow you to spend time on the ground with people, etc. So that was we did not name it theory of change, but that was afterwards. I think we could call it theory of change. But then we realized just a few years before that we did not renew it, and it's probably also because of you, Lindsay, and your work and your PhD, where you mentioned the importance of theory of change, that we started to build a new one, more adapted to our new realities, to our new experience, and so on. So we and I think you build your theory of change or you renew it when you cannot do it as a bureaucratic effort. I mean, it's something that you really care about. You really feel it's important to do it. And I think this second version arrives in a moment where we felt that we were not clear about our real goals. We were not clear about our priorities. We were not clear about how do we make change. We were not clear, and I think we still need to improve the way we evaluate what we are doing, how we measure the impact. So we really find hyper interesting to explicit this, and we did it for ourselves first, and for each person in the group, but we of course it was also for the collective and for the conversation with our partners. But now we know that we need to go further because our theory of change is only the reflect of what we have been in the past. So we are already thinking about our future theory of change, but then the questions are, how can you go further? And maybe I can ask the question, is it by doing it in a more participative way with your partners, with the people you're working for or working with, and to do it in a more inclusive way? Because many times building a theory of change is a very lonely or small group affair. So for the future, should we open up the number of people doing it? For instance, we know a lab in North France who get his theory of change written by his partner, not by the lab himself. So that's interesting. And so it's the partner who decide what will be the theory of change. That's interesting. I think that's a very interesting way of trying to do to do better. Is it where am I not? Yeah, is it by building a theory of change that would not be a theory of change of the present, but building a theory of change of the future? So why not building theory of change that design what could be the 10 next year of an organization or an innovation lab or whatever? So based on speculative design, for instance, a participative speculative design approach, but not just describing the present, but describing what could be the future that we want to happen, that we want to see happen. Is it by opening up new imaginaries? Because we know that we every time we think about the future, we have very narrow capacity of building new imaginaries. So is it using new approach to build really different imaginaries? So I don't know exactly how to go further, but for sure there is a need to build a theory of change. I don't know. I would be curious to know in this audience how many of you have tried to design their theory of change. Maybe you can mention it in the chat and say if you're happy with that. If you think because we are never happy when we publish or build a theory of change. Each time it's published, each time it's too late. I mean, you already have to think about the future one. So I would be curious to have your feedback on that. And yes, I think that there are many ways we could use to be more transformative in our theory of change, but and maybe also find other way than just doing it as a text. Maybe is it a movie? Maybe is it theater? Maybe is it a drawing, a painting? I don't know. I saw very interesting things yesterday done by Dark Matter Labs in London about that. They build a new representation, new drawings to show the future. So maybe we should also innovate in the form of theory of change. Maybe we should build something that are not limited to words and text. So that would be my starting point for new kind of theory of change.
Thanks, Stefan. Lily, do you want to talk a little bit about how Solutions Lab has used theory of change in your work?
Sure. And definitely, Lindsay, feel free to chime in if I get anything, if I don't go deep enough, I guess, in some of it. But yeah, so Solutions Lab has been using theory of change kind of throughout different cycles of the Solutions Lab in the years that I guess, 6 years now that we've been operating. So I think within each iteration of the Solutions Lab, the theory of change has gotten deeper and deeper, but it basically kind of in each evolution has been very clear about what do we mean by, or trying to be more clear about what we mean by innovation and what kind of innovation are we going for. And so we use theory of change as a way to kind of like help us make choices about what we're doing and what we're not doing, or where we're putting our energy and attention. And so that has looked like over time kind of going from being very maybe like broad and receiving different kinds of innovation challenges that might range from being sort of more complicated or like service oriented to more complex. And now it's been choosing to be more specific around working with complex challenges around eco-social issues. And so becoming also defined in sort of the domain that we're choosing to work in, and not on all the different types of domains that we might find ourselves in, and also choosing to orient through different foundations, such as systems thinking and working on equity, decolonization, and justice as embedding those and kind of making sure that we're applying those lenses in the work that we're doing. I'm being reminded of a different another space that I was in, that we're with a leadership training where an organization was looking to develop their theory of change, and one of our mentors invited them to think about it as like a theory of care. And so I think it's interesting to think about what is the theory what is the thing that we're actually going for and when we're theorizing and making choices about what it is that we're orienting towards. And so how does transformation happen? How does care happen? How does imagination happen? So thinking about the different things that might be theorized or really articulated. And yeah, I think something that comes to mind too for me is around building these, or really developing these muscles of imagination, and who we're in that practice of imagination with. So kind of similar to what Stefan was saying about the communities that we're serving or working with or collaborating with, and how are we centering what they imagine for their future and even for their current present, and how are we making space to kind of develop our capacity to imagine with them, and ensure that we're working towards what they envision and what they imagine. So yeah, we've tried to use some practices like visionary fiction to really try to write and imagine from different perspectives of those who we're trying to serve. And yeah, just kind of adopting different creative practices that is certainly like a muscle that needs development, I think, within the public sector. So yeah, I think it's about kind of bringing in and embracing those different practices. Yeah. Is there anything else that you would add there, Lindsay, about theory of change for S-Lab?
No, I think that's great. I want to pick up on something that Lee put in the chat. Lee, I'm hoping you might join us in here and say a bit more about this. But what I'm reading into your comment there about how privileging of certain, like the public sector has a very strong implicit theory of change that is kind of characterized by some of the things that you've said here, privileging private property, paltry social safety net in your context. But I think we all have that in our own context. There's this implicit, unnamed, taken for granted cultural norms of a theory of change that we don't explore, and that I find people, when you try and talk about theories of change and just to surface those things, that rather than let alone imagine a different theory of change, people, like, it's hard for people to do for a variety of reasons. I think we resist it, or we don't think it's important, or we don't even think that there are other ways of thinking about how change happens in government because it's just so practiced. But that's actually not that old in a lot of places, right? Here where we are, the local government is only about 100 and a bit years old. It's not that old of an institution. And so I wondered if you want to say a little bit more about like how we reckon and wrestle with theories of change when they're implicit and stuck and problematic and feel like they're kind of unchangeable. Or take that in whatever direction you wish.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. I mean, I think, my framework, my comparative peers are other, high income countries that are also, capitalist societies, but maybe not to the extent that the United States is, and I'm very much a domestic researcher, but I think I'm always really inspired by scholarship by my academic peers who are writing about transformation, and often they're in planning and other applied fields, so they're working with communities on these issues. But I think when you are really trying to practice in a place that is facing, really intense wealth inequality or racial inequities, the ability to start to unwind our assumption that we need sort of affluent homeowners and corporations, to get the sort of financial, like to give a city some stability, so then you can do some other sort of equity focused initiatives, right? It's always sort of like, well, you need the kind of like rich folks here, or the companies here. And so and I think one of the challenges is that often, actually, at least in the US context, I think it's changing generationally, but oftentimes Americans really buy into this as well, right? We sort of really buy into these narratives as well around growth as being a key to prosperity and the lifting all boats and stuff. So that's where I think, I think younger people are able to sort of see these opportunities more so, younger generations. So teaching remains really important, training future generations. But how do you kind of move away from this emphasis on the ownership of land and land being productive to generate, revenues so you can pay for services and stuff? That's where I just think it is a very, very challenging landscape to change. So.
Thanks, Lee. And I think there's like that your view as planner in urban context and in local context is interesting. And also imagine that extended out to other levels of government in other contexts, that like what are those entrenched theories about how change happens and how the world is organized, that actually public sector innovators are often trying to counter a lot of those ways of thinking about the world, those ways of being in the world. And, it can be difficult to be explicit about that sometimes. Just like being explicit about having an alternative view about where we're trying to go is like, can be controversial in and of itself, let alone then trying to do something about that. So I just want to kind of honor and acknowledge the work that everybody's doing in those difficult spaces. Mm-hmm. Lena, I'm hoping you might join. Stefan, can I bring someone else in before you say something? Is that okay? Okay. Let me know if it's not a good time. Oh, there you are. Welcome. I'd love just for you to say a little bit more about theory of change as a process tool.
Yeah, sorry, that was that was a very creepy light. I just got in and I'm turning on some lights. It looks very Halloween.
No worries. We're glad you're here. I'd love for you to say just a little bit more about that, if you would. That'd be great.
But the process, I was just got to thinking that I worked when I was in a unit in the city of Copenhagen. But anyhow, I worked with some evaluators on the social services there in terms of making new things happen. And I think some of the more skilled ones, they really approached theory of change as not as something that is now it's written in stone and we can't change it. But this is like a start. Of course, it can't be like too fluid because then it really doesn't help us in any way. But more saw it as a process to like, that's how we start with it. And we involve, like Stefan mentioned as well, involving the people involved in making this change, in creating the theory of change, but really going back to it again and revisiting it. And so instead of being like, oh, we've done the work, it's published, it's on our website now. And of course, there's a need for that as well. So it's not that easy because there's a need for our surroundings and our collaborators to see what are we aiming for, what direction are we moving in. But being able to actually have it as part of the way we use it is to revisit it so we can adjust. Also, just in terms of, dealing with innovation in this VUCA world where it's volatile, it's uncertain, there's complexity, there's ambiguity. So just the idea that, okay, this is a solid foundation. Yeah, it's a solid foundation for now. It's our bet for now. So maybe also embracing it as more of a process tool. This is the best way we can describe how we're trying to affect change now. And as we learn something, we embed this in our theory of change and we update it. But there's a balance to it because, of course, it still has to point it towards the direction that we're moving in. But maybe that will also give us less frustration in terms of, okay, we finished the work, it's done. Oh, it's like outdated. So just, yeah, maybe play around with it a bit more like that, going back to it more, having that as part of the innovation process as well, that you're going to revisit this. Yeah. I hope that makes sense. That was my thought. That was my thoughts on it.
Great, thanks, Lena. And then Jason, I don't know if you're here and can join us out loud in the room too. Maybe I just wanted to pick up on your comment about kind of specific structuring of a team and of a department, and because sometimes theory of change work can feel massive. And I think Lily was talking about this a little bit too, like even though it's massive and transformative work, there's always some moves that we can be making in ourselves and in our teams and in departments and with the agency and responsibilities that we have. So I was wondering if you could say a bit more about what you were thinking in your comment. Thanks. Nice to see you.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Mobile, Alabama. Yeah, when we, as an innovation unit come into a department, it could be a little bit overwhelming for someone not involved in theory of change. And, of course, the first time around, we'll guide them through it. And, the procedure's kind of ambiguous to them at the beginning, but as we go through and we take it step by step and slowly, they start to see the value of it, of working together to define what they are now and in the future and how they're going to move through it. I think it's, we don't know how long we're going to be around. So it's very important that they feel confident that they can take that framework that they developed and take it to the next step as the world around them changes. And so we make sure to build in the understanding of why we're inviting, who we're inviting into the room. It's not just the deputy directors, but it's all the way down to the custodials of a rec center. So giving them that ability and the tools along the way is just as important as the direction that they needed to begin with. And we see that now regularly, that they host annual information gathering from the community, and they understand how to synthesize it together and then turn that into action.
Thanks, Jason. Stefan, did you want to have a few last words on this one?
Yeah, very quickly. I think Lee mentioned economics, I think. And I strongly believe that our future theory of change, if we want them to be more transformative, must open their spectrum to economics, finance, power. I mean, things where there are really a capacity to change things. And I'm very happy that after 16 years, for the very first time at La 27e Région, we have the possibility to launch an action research program about the new economic models in cities. It's the very first time we can do it, about foundational economy, community wealth building, donut theory, etc. I wouldn't suspect we had the capacity to do it even 5 years ago, but I'm happy because we know that every time we have the possibility to challenge patterns in finance patterns, economic patterns, then there is a chance that we can create more impact. At least I think we must include this in the spectrum of our future theory of change. And of course, climate change, etc. But what about finance, economy, probably regulation too, etc.
Thanks, Stefan, and thanks, Lily, and for those of you that jumped in. I'm going to move us to our third prompt, our last one, and then maybe I'll briefly start, and then Stefan and Lily and Chloe, you can join as you wish. So the third one is what might we need to cultivate within ourselves, and what might we need to nurture amongst us to become better catalysts, enablers, and advocates of transformation. So what comes to mind for me here is, so Lily and I are working on writing this piece that we're lovingly calling flailing, or maybe dancing, or maybe swimming in the cracks, or swimming in the sledge. It's like, what is in this space in between where we are and where we're trying to go? And how do we actually spend more time really understanding what's in that space in between, rather than like trying to really quickly move to what is where we're trying to go. we're playing with the Vercana Institute 2 loops model. Maybe Pavan or Lily could drop that into the slide somewhere so people can see that if they're not familiar with it. But basically there's 2 loops. There's a loop of the dominant system that goes like this, and then a loop of the emergent system that goes like this. And there's kind of this space in between. And there's this description of moving away from the dominant system requires hospicing of the old, and then it requires this like nurturing seeding of the new. But Lily and I have like been really talking in an interesting way, I think, into that hospice and the space, and imagining, like, because we find that no matter how much we try and imagine and enact the new, it's like we keep getting pulled back to the peak of the dominant system, like the what is, and the theories that hold that in place. And so spending like I'm thinking a lot about, there's a researcher and a practitioner at University of British Columbia named Vanessa Andriotti, who has this book and this practice called Hospicing Modernity. I really recommend it if you can. It's academic-ish, so if you like reading in that way, then I really recommend it. But she just really talks about how we can't possibly imagine what the new is without really letting go of what exists, and these real embodied practices of taking these leaps, like the personal courage and required to take these bigger leaps, the understanding in ourselves of what the mindsets and the patterns that we hold, even as public sector innovators, that are no longer serving the work, that we need to find a way to compost, back to compost again, the compost to let go of, in order to really get to something that we kind of can't even imagine. So we can sort of imagine things that are a little bit better than the current system, but maybe not radically transformatively different than it. So I think that dwelling in the sludge, dwelling in the mess a little bit longer, and like, we're all pretty good at being uncomfortable. Like, that's kind of comes along with the territory of doing this work, is holding ambiguity, holding discomfort, holding uncertainty, and the not knowing. And so really spending more time there and like really wallowing in it, as mucky as that sounds, it feels like that's a lot of what I've been thinking about lately, as practices we need to cultivate in ourselves. So maybe I'll leave that there and then see if Stefan or Lily want to jump in on this one, or Chloe, you're welcome to. What might public sector innovators need to cultivate within ourselves? What might we need to nurture amongst us to become better catalysts, enablers, and advocates of transformation?
I can add something maybe. I'm a boomer guy, so it takes a long time for people like me to have this kind of question. I agree with all what is mentioned on the table. I also think we need many maybe more practical things, such as a better understanding of the geopolitics of public innovation. You remember maybe a French philosopher called Bruno Latour, who died a few months ago, and he said we need to know what we are ready to fight for, but also what we are ready to fight against, and to be more aware, less naive, and more aware what the opposition, where are the tensions. And this is what I call sometimes the geopolitics of public innovation, is that nobody agrees in the space. I mean, there are many opposition, many tensions. So how as a professional are we more aware of the tensions? And maybe we need to learn about it. Added to all these personal quality capacities that we must develop, there are also new eras in political science, in geopolitics, that we must also learn and being better at, I think.
Yeah, I think just picking up on some things that Lindsay had mentioned. The work is so, like, I guess where I'm spending a lot of my time is really in the personal kind of like inner work, and the relationship between like our inner transformation and then the outer transformation that we might see through different innovations, or the different relationships that we're trying to cultivate. And yeah, it is a lot of like slowing down to just see what's actually happening, and resist this kind of like this impulse and tendency to like make things operational as quickly as possible. And I think that like definitely the way that I've approached, or I kind of thought I was using innovation when I first kind of came to this work, was to use it in like this sort of linear outcome based way, where it's like we're going to get to this kind of out like this this different solution space eventually, when I guess I'm embracing now more that it's navigating kind of just being in the muck, and there are different portals to different solution directions, and also there's just so much there that needs to be overturned and kind of examined and composted from like the way that different patterns play out, or different taboos, as Stefan was saying, or different culture norms, different traumas that we're all inhabiting at different scales. And so like there's just so much that needs to be looked at and to be really like held and reckoned with, I think, in that in between space. And yeah, so I guess I think about using even very practical tools as ways to understand the system more. So things like, for example, in a previous lab that we did last year around circularity with the food system, a lot of what we were doing prototyping in a lot of different ways, but it was helping us to just really learn more about the system and surface more places where things are stuck. And so, yes, there was this orientation towards hopefully there's some different potential solutions or interventions. And also these are ways for us to really learn and understand and just kind of follow the stuckness and see how we can transmute it. Like, how can we compost it in different ways? And yeah, and then I think about other practices of at the individual level of just even being like tuning into our bodies and just acknowledging that we are doing all of this work in an embodied, like in a body, and that we need to be bringing our bodies along with us in transformation. And so kind of drawing in on different somatic practices that can actually serve to help us like help to unstick where these patterns and these different aspects of the dominant system might actually be manifesting in our own bodies. And that's been especially healing and transformative for folks who have been oppressed by these dominant systems. So yeah, so I think about kind of these different things at the personal level that are very like important sort of anchor points or wayfinders for navigating transformation and being in that really difficult space, but needing to be there in order to reckon and work through it. Yeah.
Thanks, Lily. I want to pick up on something that's in the chat that Lee shared, and then also the Anonymous Panda was writing in the slide deck, who Anonymous Panda maybe does or does not want to join this conversation. I'll let you decide. But Lee, you said something about less cynicism, and Anonymous Panda said healthy cynicism or healthy skepticism. And I'm just wondering if you want to play with that tension and that idea a little bit here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think so I was a professor for about 10 years before I came to BCPI. And I think before I came to BCPI, I was at another innovation lab that focused on healthcare delivery. And And I think one of the difficult things moving from a traditional academic job to like very explicitly applied research is to let go of, I mean, I come from a critical urban sort of training, so it's very much about like the critique, you know, of capitalism or governance models, you know, that again focus on growth and certain types of political economy, and I think those perspectives and that type of research can actually be really important when you have young people coming up, like as an educator, so that folks can understand sort of like new ways of thinking about the world that they are inheriting and how they want to move about it. I think that that can be really powerful. But when it comes to really trying to find solutions and make progress, sort of always having that critical lens on, at least for me personally, has felt like much less helpful, right? And so, and particularly because, and I'm hearing this from other academics, when they're trying to make inroads into the public sector, and in particular, there's a sort of like immediate, there's a higher chance of defensiveness, like, well, we're doing our best with scarce resources. So sort of entering from the, you know, you're doing it wrong, right? You're not doing it right. Like, that's, I think, oftentimes academics, not our intent, but can often be heard that way. So I that's where I say, I do think healthy cynicism matters. I'm like, you know, we don't want to be just join boosterism and be little else. But I think that sort of starting from a place of people are sort of trying to do the right thing with the resources that they have actually can be pretty important for some of us in changing our orientation.
Thanks, Lee. Let's give a moment to see if anyone else wants to join on that. Skepticism. Okay. I think I know, Stefan, you have to jump off, but I'll channel you. Thank you for being here with us. I'm going to channel a conversation we had with each other.
Thank you, Joel. Bye-bye.
Bye, Stefan. About a year ago that in some ways indirectly led to the gathering up of this community of practice. So Stefan and I and a few others were chatting about how, as people, like, he's been in the field, the 27e Région has been in the field for, Chloe, you've been around for your team has been around for a really long time. You're some of the folks that have been around the longest. And I remember Stefan saying really clearly, these are my interpretation of his words, but saying really clearly how we need to do a better job. This is kind of in the call to action and accountability to the movement. We need to do a better job of really taking our knowledge mobilization, our collective insight development work to the next level, so that people who are coming into this space or are needing to transform their practice in this space have more resources and more things to draw upon for what it's really like to be in the work, and that we're beyond the stage of needing to sort of method kits and toolkits, and we need different ways, different strategic ways of orienting and reorienting and re-examining the work that we're doing as public sector innovators, whether we're in labs or in some other role. And so that's really what we're trying to do here together in this space. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the community of practice, and then we'll finish at about 1/4 the hour, whatever hour that is for you. And then your hosting team's going to hang around a little longer to see if anyone has any questions or anything else you want to share before we go. So the community of practice, the idea of a community of practice is that we learn better together. We learn by sharing our questions, staying entangled with each other, meeting new folks. We will learn better, faster together, and be able to apply what we're learning in some ways that are super helpful for us. So for us as the hosting team, we really are holding these questions ourselves, as I said at the beginning, and wrestling and contending with them ourselves. And we really want to invite all of you and others into this space with us so that we can really we can get better at our own practice and get better as a movement. So we invite you in to join us. The community of practice is virtual, both synchronous and asynchronous. It will run from now for about a year. And we'll be engaging it from here. We'll share this conversation recording and the one from last week online shortly, as soon as we figure out where those are going to live. And then we'll have 3 focus cycles of inquiry. So in November, December, January, we'll have a focus cycle of inquiry hosted by La 27e Région team with some amazing guests focused on theories of change and theories of transformation. So we'll have 3 sessions that are doing a deep dive on that topic. And then in February, March, April, with Lily and Penny Hagen from the Auckland Co-Design Lab, also called the Lab, we'll focus on the inner and outer work of transformation. What do we need to cultivate? What capacities and competencies do we need to cultivate in ourselves and with each other to do this work? So that will start in February. And again, it will be 3 sessions over about 3 months. And then our 3rd cycle will happen after that, but kind of in between spring and summer in the Northern Hemisphere. Focus topic to be determined based on what's coming up and what we want to explore together. And then in the fall, we'll do some sort of learning festival, virtual with the States of Change. Will host us as well as the rest of the hosting team to sort of gather up the shared insights across our work, and then also to see what's coming up and where we may want to go together next. That's the synchronous part. We'd love for you to join us. There's 2 different ways to join. There's more than 2 ways, but there's 2 ways that we're describing that you can join. The first is to really join as a core member of those focus cycles of 1 or more. So you're really committing to come to each of the sessions to deepen your own practice and to do some kind of wrestling and reckoning with questions in between. You're welcome to join as you're able, as an observer, as a participant, as you were all today. So whatever works best for you, and you might need to figure that out as we go. They're not all going to work for everybody in every time zone. The first cycle will work in this time zone. It will be kind of North America, Europe, Africa oriented. The second cycle will be North America, Asia, New Zealand, Australia, friendly time zones. And the third one is still to be determined. What else am I forgetting, friends, about the community of practice? Pavan, am I forgetting anything? It is an applied and action research project, so you will be asked to provide your consent to participate in the research, but you have choices there. And at the end, Pavan will share a link to the registration/consent form to participate. We have all your email addresses already from registering from today, so we'll let you know when the next cycle is up and running. The first session will be on November the 29th, and then we'll figure out the others from there. So that you've got our email address if you have any questions. The website is there with more information. You can register through the consent form, and maybe we'll see you in about a month. And if you have any other questions beyond that, please stay and hang around. There is a Medium blog space. And so if you're someone who's more inclined to thinking by writing, please feel free to join us in that space. That's not meant just for the hosts to be writing into, but if others have things they want to write or draw and publish in the shared Pushing the Boundaries space, we welcome that too. Okay, I'll say thank you and farewell to you all from here.